Hey there, good morning. I hope everyone's doing well. I know I am. You can see the sun in the sky here. It's warming up. So, truly blessed. I love it. The transition from winter to spring and on into all the warm weather just can't be beat. Although I miss that. The fall season where you get to snuggle up into something comfortable to keep that warm weather, that warmth inside. I miss that, but that's all right. Say today, I'm recording to share a message that's, it's going to be received well in its time. Some people already believe, but it's that demons are real. Demons are here, and they work just as they've been described in the Bible. Sorry, hit a crosswalk here, and somebody waved me through. So demons are here. And I can share the story as to how I know that. Now this one ties in to following my experience, the vision that God gave me in the garage. After that, I was able to sense things that I hadn't really noticed before. I became aware of it probably. I was always good at kind of reading a room or, being able to jump in on a vibe with something or whatever, but something changed after the vision and the visit that I had with God. And I was able to sense things. And one day after that, I was driving and I was making the decision. I was either going to go and visit my brother, or I was going to go visit my grandfather. And now my grandfather was living in an assisted care facility, a memory care facility, because he'd been suffering from dementia. And he'd been getting, progressively worse the way this stuff goes. And I was listening to metal music at the time. I still like metal music a lot, but I was listening to metal music at the time, and I pulled up to a stop sign, and it was a T in the road. I could either go right to go to my brother, or I could go left to go to my grandfather. And I was like, I'm gonna go visit my brother. Not that I didn't visit my grandpa, right? I stopped by periodically and spent some time with him. So it's relaxed. But I said, today I'm going to go visit my brother. And as soon as I went to go and take that right turn, the music on my radio, like the volume adjusted. But it was the music, the instruments that changed to like a deeper level. And the vocals became louder. And exactly at that point in time was a part in the song where the singer screamed, "You're effing up my plan." Now, I know what you may be thinking, but this also leads to a good point, is that whatever you surround yourself with, God is going to use that to speak to you. So there can be a lot of confusion, right? If you surround yourself in things that aren't what you would expect to be godly or around God, you're going to be confused when God ends up using something that you wouldn't expect him to say to you, such as a curse word, right? But this is what happened. So, not being one to want to mess up the Lord's plans, I said, whoop, and I took the other direction. And I drove there. Now, every time I'd gone and visited my grandpa prior, I didn't say anything, I just sat near him, because that's kind of what he was doing. And as he got progressively further along in the disease, we started to find that he had been dressing in clothes that weren't appropriate for the climate. He was always dressing in things to keep himself warmer. So he'd be wearing a coat, gloves, and a hat inside when it was, 70 degrees or whatever they keep it in there. So I would usually just go and I would sit with him and just spend time with him. Sometimes he'd look at me and he'd give me like kind of a knowing glance. Other times, he would just kind of seem like, hey, I got a friend sitting near me, whatever. And we just people watch, which those old folks homes, excellent for people watching. So I went there and I sat next to him, and this time he was sitting on a bench outside of the elevator. It was a two-story facility, and there was an elevator, and he was sitting out in front of that, wearing the clothing to keep himself warmer, and I sat down next to him. But when I had entered the facility this day, I could feel in the air, there was a depressive air. It was hard to describe, and it was something that I didn't notice until what had happened to me in my experience. And so I sat near him, and there was something very, very wrong. And I'm sitting near him, and I can feel the depression. I'm literally feeling like tears coming to my eyes because of the depth of the depression that was in the air. And I start to realize as I'm sitting next to him, things are happening strangely around us. And like to note would be the elevator. People were coming out and making their way towards dinner time and stuff like that. And I didn't take much note of it. I'm just sitting there with my grandfather, but I start to realize the elevator is opening and letting people out at a rate that wasn't appropriate for the amount of residents in the facility. And it gets to a point where the door's opening and people are pouring out. And then in like another 10 seconds later, door open, people pouring out. More and more people. And so all this is leading into what's coming up here. But at one point, my grandfather looks at me and he starts pulling something out of his eye. And he starts like kind of reaching things out of his eye. And I realize that he starts pulling sand out of his eye, like beach sand. And not just a little bit, like, hey, Grandpa, when did you go to Daytona Beach type sand level? And so this is going on. Eventually, at some point, he gets up and he starts shambling in the direction of his room. And I say shambling to emphasize that he hadn't been moving very fast for a while. You know, he was just doing that partial dementia shuffle, and then also partial, I'm getting older and don't move as quick as I used to. And I followed him back to his room, but he made it there faster because I was just following and watching and sensing everything that was going on. And so his door was closed in front of me, and I got to his door, I opened it, and I walked inside, and he was sitting in his, it's a fabric, and I don't think it's a Lazy Boy brand, but you know, that style chair. A nice, comfortable old man chair. And he's sitting there, and the TV's on in the room. And I want to try to give you like a feel of the layout, but it may not make total sense of how it is. But you enter the room, and it's a small kitchenette. It's what you enter, and it's basically just probably I don't know, maybe a 7 by 4 foot area. And there's a little table in there as well. And just beyond that is the living room area. And on the right side is where his chair was. And just beyond that is an entryway to the bedroom. And that's on the right side. And then you turn the corner of the room, like straight ahead when you enter is the window. And there's like a couch there. And on the left side is the TV. And that's pretty much the whole thing. You know, they're just small, and they're cool and convenient for us as we're going through these things in life. Heck, I'd probably take one right now. Easy to clean, everything like that. But so that's what's going on. So I walk in, and that depressive air is still in the air. And my grandfather's sitting there, but he has a different kind of look in his eye. And so I'm kind of tracking this feeling something's going on. But I look on the television, and there is, it's a political, I don't know if it was a debate or whatever, but Donald Trump was on the TV. But it was difficult to tell that this was what was going on because something was scrambling the TV signal. It's as, you know, if you're old enough to have been blessed to experience the rabbit ears that you used to use on the televisions, it was like I could describe it like that, but like something was messing up the signal. And so I walked around the room, something just kept me going. I went and I walked by my grandpa, and I walked to the other side of the room, and I made my way around the room, and eventually I walked back past the television, and I'm looking because I can tell something is wrong. And when I get past the television, there's an end table, and on the end table was there was supposed to be like a statuette, and it's a carp like 2 carps jumping out of the water. My grandfather's name was Denny Carpenter, and they called him Carp. So, it was kind of a cool little thing for him. But that carp statue was on the floor. And also next to it was a picture that was face down on the floor as well. But as to note as well, these things, it's like they were thrown down almost angrily or struggling. It wasn't like an accidental dropping. It's as if it was done on purpose. And so I stopped there to notice what was going on, and I bent down, I knelt down, and I picked up the carp statue and I set it back on top. But when I did that, I looked up and I realized that the drawer that was in this end table, it didn't fit. And when I say it didn't fit, I mean it was too small for the size of the end table. And I reached up and I grabbed it with both hands. And as I pulled it out, what I'm telling you is that it was floating in there. And I didn't know if it was in my head. I decided to check. I tried to put it back in as if it would fit, but it wouldn't fit, and nor would it float anymore after I touched it. So I took it out, and of course at this time, I'm basically running on autopilot. This is a lot going on. It's quite the experience, is the one way I'll put it. So I set down the drawer and I picked up the portrait, the picture that was knocked on the floor. And out of the frame came a photo of my grandpa. And I never met her, but I knew for some reason, somehow I knew it was his mom as well. So it was a photo of them. And I took it, and I took the photo over to my grandpa. And I told him to take the photo. And he just made kind of like a kind of a noise, and he reached out to grab it with the gloves on his hand. But I told him to grab it differently. I told him to take off his gloves and touch it with his bare hand. And that's when he looked up at me. And he waited a second, and I kept staring at him, insisting that he do so. And then he jumped up out of his seat faster than he had moved in a long time. And he said, "I guess it's back into the pit for me." Now at this point, I'm pretty much stunned by what's happened, what I've experienced. And after he said I guess it's back into the pit for me, he beelined it straight for the door, opened it, and went out of the room. I turned around, I set the picture back in the area where I found it, and then I started to follow him away. By the time I made it out of the room, he wasn't anywhere to be seen in the facility. But I didn't go searching, okay? Like, at that point, I basically had everything. It took everything of me just to keep walking. And I just walked straight for the door and I left. I left the facility. So now I guess I'll add on to that. Since my experience, whatever God has made of me, done for me, whatever it is, I've been able to tell. You can tell different spirits that move. You can tell the connection that the Holy Spirit makes. You can tell when something that isn't of the Lord has moved. And you can tell in the result of people's actions which spirit they've been influenced by. But I have, excuse me, I've been practicing being able to do and understand this stuff since God visited me. So that's my story to say And that's just this part to say that I understand and I know demons are real. They're real. And I wanted to put this out here so that if God has done anything, if He leads you to this video, if you're experiencing something that just isn't right, I'm here. I'll listen. And I'm putting this out there. If you need to reach out, if you think that you want a second set of eyes on something that you're unsure of, I'm more than willing to be there as well. At a minimum, you'll get a prayer. You'll get somebody who can just be there and understand. But if we have the opportunity to chase out of this world that which tries to destroy us, might as well mount up, right? Might as well mount up. Sorry, pardon me, I'm getting to a busy intersection here again. Now I'm supposed to address, and there's going to be more to this, lots to understand, the story of the Demon Legion. There's so much more to understand, even from just what was shared in that story. But I need you to understand, when they say we are many, when they call themselves Legion, they mean it. And it's almost uncomfortable to come to terms and understand how numerous they are and to see them out in action. So I guess I'll leave it there. I appreciate your time. If you need to reach out, please. Comments are open. We can coordinate something. I'm here. And whatever you're going through, I promise, God is watching. He's seeing. If you think you're under oppression, if you think something is trying to influence you, He sees it. And don't give up. Because I've seen the nasty ways that Legion will try to convince you to do things. They show in power things that you wouldn't expect to be able to happen. And then they use that to try to manipulate you. Some of the worst sin in this world, I'm telling you, has occurred because we failed to identify and place blame on the correct influence for it. So God's got you. Whatever you need to do, if the best you can do to battle the demon that's plaguing you is to get on your knees and move nowhere else, do so. Raise that prayer. Jesus loves you. He's got plans. Okay, thank you all. God bless.